The Hereditary Terror Revelation. Envision yourself positioned within an age-old crypt 4,000 years following the final exhalation of its last inhabitant. The radiant burial mask shines under your torchlight, concealing mysteries that would appall its originators. You extend your hand to feel the bandages of a youthful pharaoh and abruptly grasp a dreadful reality. This young man didn't perish due to sickness or mishap. He succumbed because his mother and father were siblings. His grandparents were siblings. His great-grandparents were siblings. Every inhalation he took was a battle against the hereditary venom coursing through his bloodstream. Picture maturing with the knowledge that you're a deity incarnate, yet your physique betrays you daily. Your backbone twists agonizingly. Your jaw refuses to align correctly. You require a cane at 16. Palace attendants murmur about the hex that trails your lineage like a specter. You lack comprehension of heredity, as that science won't emerge for millennia. Yet, you sense something is gravely amiss with your kin. Your parents, grandparents, everyone you've known believes preserving your blood's purity justifies any cost. They witness your torment and deem it sacred. They observe infants perish and extol the enigmatic will of the gods. They've forged a living inferno and labeled it utopia. What if I revealed this wasn't a tale? What if I informed you that Earth's mightiest rulers, the pharaohs of ancient Egypt, spent 3,000 years methodically ruining themselves through hereditary seclusion? They believed their blood was divine, too valuable to mingle with ordinary mortals. Instead, they crafted a crucible of human agony that would reverberate through time. Before we venture into these gilded crypts to unearth the truth about Egypt's most sorrowful sovereigns, share in the comments where you're viewing from. We're about to embark together through 3,000 years of anguish. I find it astonishing that individuals worldwide can collectively behold these ancient calamities. Why pharaohs wed their siblings. To comprehend how Earth's most formidable figures became casualties of their own creation, we must travel back to the dawn of Egyptian society. The pharaohs didn't intend to obliterate themselves. They thought they were safeguarding something holy. They believed opting for a sibling as a spouse was a sacred duty, a divine mandate to maintain their celestial essence untainted by mortal strains. Imagine the inaugural pharaoh who deemed his sister the sole woman worthy of his union. He gazed at his subjects, farmers, artisans, common folk, and felt repulsion at the notion of his sacred essence blending with their ordinary blood. His clerics endorsed this choice. His counselors weighed the political benefits. None considered the toll on his offspring. The reasoning appeared impeccable then. Pharaohs weren't mere monarchs. They were deities incarnate, terrestrial manifestations of Horus, divine progeny of Ra himself. How could a deity wed a mortal? How could sacred blood be diluted with human frailty? The palace's priests and advisors found the answer evident. Gods must wed gods, siblings must wed siblings, the lineage must remain untainted. What began as spiritual conviction morphed into cultural fixation. Royal siblings were raised believing their union was not only natural but essential. They were taught their lineage bore Ra's essence, and mingling it with foreign blood would provoke divine wrath and ruin the realm. Generation after generation, they doomed their progeny to suffer for unchallenged beliefs. Each sibling marriage was like pouring toxin into a spring. The first generation might exhibit minor issues, a slight jaw misalignment, perhaps, or peculiar facial traits. Priests would proclaim these as signs of divine approval, evidence of the gods' favor. But hereditary damage amassed like silt in the Nile, layering until the lineage's foundation turned toxic. What started as divine safeguarding became systematic annihilation, so gradual that none discerned the pattern. A royal infant born with a malformed foot, a divine gift. A prince dying at 20, summoned to the afterlife. A princess unable to bear viable offspring, chosen for loftier spiritual roles. Every hereditary calamity was reframed as divine intent. Every inbreeding symptom was spun as godly favor. The Egyptians were ingenious, erecting pyramids enduring today, devising mathematics that astound modern scholars, and creating an early written language. Yet, they couldn't perceive their royal family's plight because they refused to see. Court healers noted odd ailments and premature deaths but never linked them to the obvious cause. The evidence lay across centuries of royal crypts, but their faith blinded them to the glaring truth. A hereditary time bomb ticked in every palace cradle, every royal marriage bed, every prayer for the divine lineage's continuation. What they believed would preserve their divinity ultimately exposed their humanity in the most tragic manner. Akhenaten, the heretic's misshapen kin. Nowhere was this tragedy more evident than in the royal family that stunned Egypt to its core. In the blistering desert heat of the 14th century BCE, a dynasty emerged that pushed royal inbreeding to its most extreme and documented extent. This is their tale, beginning with one of Egypt's most unsettling figures. In the sweltering heat of 1353 BCE, in a palace overlooking the Nile, a child is born who will become one of history's most controversial pharaohs. But before Akhenaten becomes the heretic king who forsakes Egypt's gods, he is merely a boy ensnared in a body that defies his divine claims. His skull is stretched, elongated like dough. His hips are broad, feminine. His chest develops features no royal garb can conceal. The young prince matures amid servants who avoid his gaze and courtiers who speak cautiously. All see something amiss with the future pharaoh, but none dare voice it. His reflection in polished bronze reveals a face unlike the god-kings in temple art. His gait is clumsy, his voice odd. Other royal children observe him with fear and pity. The palace becomes a stage for hushed talks and averted eyes. Servants learn to ignore his unusual form. Priests devise intricate justifications for why their future god-king differs from divine statues. His parents, products of sibling unions, see their sons' deformities and convince themselves these are signs of divine favor. After all, the gods' ways are mysterious. When the prince ascends as pharaoh, he does something unprecedented. He commands artists to depict the royal family truthfully. For the first time, Egyptian art shows elongated skulls, protruding bellies, and odd proportions. Historians call this an artistic revolution, but the truth is simpler and sadder. The young king is weary of living a falsehood. If his body is a divine temple, the gods must resemble him. Tutankhamun, the boy king's tragic DNA. The paintings and sculptures from his reign are eerie, depicting a family that appears almost otherworldly. Elongated heads, feminine curves on male bodies, children mirroring their parents' disturbing proportions. Modern viewers often assume these are artistic stylizations. They're not. They document hereditary damage so severe that even royal propaganda couldn't mask it. The heretic pharaoh weds Nefertiti, producing 6 daughters. Court records suggest sons who died in infancy, their frail bodies unable to bear the hereditary burden. The surviving daughters display the same elongated features and odd proportions. Palace artists portray them as divine beauties, but servants whisper of princesses who shun sunlight and struggle with simple tasks. Perhaps this king's religious upheaval, abandoning Egypt's gods for a single deity, stems from hereditary desperation. If the old gods cursed his lineage, perhaps a new god might show mercy. He relocates the capital to Amarna, a desert city far from Egypt's traditional power centers, abandoning centuries of custom to declare himself the sole conduit of divine will. But even a new god cannot mend genes poisoned for generations. The move to Amarna becomes an exercise in royal seclusion, the family living in splendid hereditary isolation, producing art that documents their deformities while claiming divine perfection. The revolutionary pharaoh dies young, like most men in his line. His religious upheaval dies with him, forsaken by successors eager to restore tradition. Amarna is abandoned, its structures crumbling under the desert sun. His name is erased from monuments, his memory condemned by the priests whose gods he rejected. Yet, the hereditary damage persists, passed like a curse to the next generation, to a boy who would become even more famous for his tragic inheritance. Cleopatra, the last inbred pharaoh. The heretic king's son inherits not only a throne but DNA so compromised that every breath is a struggle against his ancestors' accumulated errors. Born in 1341 BCE, he carries his father's curse. His name is Tutankhamun, Egypt's most tragic king. Imagine being 9, struggling to walk while palace attendants feign ignorance of your stumbles. The boy king's left foot turns inward, a condition modern medicine calls clubfoot, making every step torturous. His spine curves unnaturally, forcing him into painful postures that turn sitting on the golden throne into hidden agony. His chest is malformed, making breathing arduous in Egypt's desert heat. Palace healers hover constantly, but their prayers and elixirs cannot repair what heredity has broken. The cruel irony is that this teenage pharaoh is worshipped as a deity while his body fails him daily. Subjects bow before a youth needing canes to cross a room. Religious rites meant to display divine power become exercises in concealed frailty. Priests proclaim the pharaoh's divine might while servants discreetly provide supports to keep their god-king upright. Court records, uncovered millennia later, paint a heart-wrenching picture of royal medical efforts. Over 130 walking sticks are placed in the young ruler's tomb, not symbols of authority but desperate aids for a body barely able to stand. Some are simple, others ornate golden staffs, all serving the same purpose, upholding the illusion of divine perfection for a crippled god-king. The science behind royal genetic damage. The divine child grows up in gilded isolation, surrounded by opulence but starved of true human connection. Other children are kept away, partly for his safety, partly to conceal his condition. His wife, Akhenaten, also his half-sister, carries the same hereditary burden, ensuring their union is not only incestuous but almost certain to produce damaged offspring. Their attempts at children yield miscarriages and stillbirths, tiny mummies buried with them, silent testaments to hereditary incompatibility. The psychological torment of Egypt's tragic prince is unimaginable. He grows up amid temple walls adorned with images of robust, flawless pharaohs, his supposed ancestors, yet wonders why he resembles them so little. Court artists, tasked with crafting his official portraits, face an impossible task, making a hereditary catastrophe appear divine. They resolve it by abandoning realism, creating stylized images that scarcely resemble the broken boy on the throne. Palace healers meticulously document his condition, unknowingly creating the world's first detailed study of inbreeding's effects. They catalog his bone deformities, immune deficiencies, and hormonal irregularities, noting his frequent illnesses, slow healing, and struggles to gain weight despite royal abundance. They cannot comprehend that they're recording the inevitable outcome of centuries of hereditary isolation. At 19, the young king's immune system collapses. A simple malaria case, survivable by healthy individuals, proves fatal for his weakened body. As he lies dying in his golden palace, fever consuming him, perhaps he realizes what his healers cannot. His suffering isn't divine will but the consequence of ancestors prioritizing political purity over human health. How this pattern shaped history. Tutankhamun's death didn't end the cycle. Power blinds people to inconvenient truths, and the allure of pure bloodlines outweighed evidence of their dangers. 1200 years later, as Egyptian independence waned, foreign conquerors studied the same temple walls that inspired Akhenaten's family, read the same religious texts justifying inbreeding, and chose to repeat the disastrous experiment. When Alexander the Great's empire fragmented, his general Ptolemy claimed Egypt and made a catastrophic choice. Surrounded by depictions of divine pharaohs wed to their sisters, this Macedonian conqueror decided this was the key to power. Unaware, he was poised to replicate Egypt's greatest hereditary error. The Ptolemies, Macedonian Greeks viewing themselves as superior, understood that Egyptian subjects expected pharaohs to uphold divine traditions. Thus, Ptolemy established a system of sibling marriages, creating the most concentrated experiment in royal inbreeding. For 300 years, they perfected hereditary isolation, their family tree becoming a tangled ladder of repeated names. By the time Cleopatra was born in 69 BCE, the 250-year experiment had produced a horrifying family tree, siblings, cousins, parents, and children in an impossible genetic knot. The myth of Cleopatra as a stunning beauty is likely just that, a myth. After 250 years of intense inbreeding, she likely bore the physical hallmarks of her line: pronounced facial features, possible jaw deformities, and hereditary damage masked by royal propaganda. Her intelligence, however, shone through, intact despite her lineage's genetic catastrophe. Speaking 9 languages and mastering mathematics and philosophy, she navigated the Roman Republic's treacherous politics with unmatched skill. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were not just political but genetic lifelines, attempts to introduce fresh blood into her poisoned lineage. Yet, Roman politics proved as brutal as Egyptian genetics. Octavian, the future Augustus, eliminated her healthier children, extinguishing hope for genetic redemption. Cleopatra's suicide in 30 BC ended not just her life but a 250-year experiment in human destruction. The human cost of divine blood. The pattern wasn't unique to famous dynasties. Archaeological evidence shows royal inbreeding was cyclical, not constant. Periods of extreme hereditary isolation alternated with recovery through outside marriages, only to revert to inbreeding under political pressures. Egyptian history reveals a horrifying cycle across millennia. Each powerful dynasty viewed its bloodline as too precious to mix, breeding genetic nationalism that led to collapse. Evidence lies in royal tombs, mummies showing inbreeding's telltale signs. Even early dynasties practiced occasional sibling marriages, laying the foundation for future disasters. After the Old Kingdom's fall, Middle Kingdom pharaohs married foreign princesses, refreshing royal bloodlines. For centuries, sibling marriages nearly vanished, and mummies from this period show fewer hereditary issues. But power breeds arrogance, and by the New Kingdom, pharaohs like Akhenaten's family resumed extreme inbreeding. The Amarna period, alongside the later Ptolemaic dynasty, represents the most concentrated examples. Later dynasties again turned to foreign marriages, improving genetic diversity and dynasty stability. Yet, the Ptolemies' obsession with bloodline purity wrote the final chapter in this tragedy. Each cycle taught that diversity brings strength, isolation destruction, yet dynasties repeated their predecessors' errors. The human cost was staggering. Imagine waking daily in a golden palace, called divine, yet your spine screams with pain. Your jaw aches from eating, your breathing labors from a malformed chest. Worshipped as a god, you're more fragile than the poorest peasant. Royal children grew up isolated, unable to play with others or form true bonds, surrounded by siblings and cousins mirroring their deformities. Their divine status was a psychological prison. Luxury couldn't fix crooked bones or weak hearts. They saw ancestors' portraits with similar traits, elongated skulls, protruding jaws, and noticed royal infants died more often. They knew their bloodline was cursed but were compelled to perpetuate it. For royal women, every pregnancy was a deadly gamble, with records hinting at mothers retreating from public life after repeated losses. Modern genetics explains what ancients couldn't. Sibling reproduction risks a 25% chance of inheriting harmful recessive genes, which accumulate across generations. Visible deformities, elongated skulls, jaw issues, were only the surface. Compromised immune systems, hormonal imbalances, and neurological issues ravaged their bodies. The Pharaohs' quest for divine purity became a millennia-long experiment in human suffering, turning palaces into laboratories of pain and god-kings into victims of their own beliefs. Their mummies, studied today, teach us more about genetics than any textbook. Their pain became our wisdom, urging us to value health over tradition, humanity over ideology, and love over power.